I didn't recognize my own land when I came back after a year. The empty hill my father left me now sprouted 11 gleaming mansions, fresh black asphalt roads, and a gleaming HOA sign bolted right into what used to be my fence line. The HOA board stepped forward like they owned the place, informing me I wasn't allowed to trespass on community property. I said nothing. I just opened the original surveyed deed from 1972. The one that proved every single structure they'd built sat squarely inside my property boundaries, while I was gone. They'd used a forged map and a crooked contractor who swore the land was abandoned. They didn't know that building on someone else's land triggers automatic retroactive lease penalties under state law. Now every mansion they built owes me rent. My name is Rowan Trent, and this HOA just became the biggest payday of my life. But it wasn't about the money. It was about what they stole while I was 3 states away watching my mother die. It was about the arrogance in their eyes when they erased my family's name with a forged signature. They thought absence meant surrender. They were about to learn the difference between gone and forgotten. The gate didn't used to be there. Neither did the guardhouse, the camera mounted on the post, or the uniformed man who stepped out to block my truck. I rolled down the window, and he leaned in with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. His hand rested on the edge of my door, casual but deliberate. I looked past him, toward the hill. My hill. Except it wasn't empty anymore. Where there used to be wild grass and the old oak tree my father planted in '68, there were now rooftops, 11 of them. Mansions. Actually, 2 stories each, stone facades, wraparound porches, and landscape lighting that made the whole ridge glow like a resort. I felt my jaw tighten. "I live here," I said. He glanced at a clipboard. "Name, Rowan Trent." He ran his finger down a list, flipped a page, then shook his head. "Not seeing you on the resident roster. Mr. Trent, this is private property, Trent Ridge Estate. HOA managed." I stared at him. "Trent Ridge?" He nodded. "Yes, sir. If you're looking for someone specific, I can call ahead, but I can't let you through without clearance." I could have argued. Could have told him I'd been gone a year, not forever. That I left to take care of my mother after her stroke, watched her fade in a hospice bed in Ohio, buried her 3 weeks ago, and drove straight back the moment I could. But I didn't say any of that. I just put the truck in reverse, backed out, and parked on the shoulder of the county road. Then I grabbed the lockbox from under the passenger seat. Inside was the deed, the original deed, recorded in '72 when my father bought 15 acres of unincorporated land for next to nothing. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was yellowed. The ink faded in places, but the boundaries were clear. Latitude and longitude, meets and bounds, the old oak tree as a landmark. I pulled up the county assessor's website on my phone, entered the parcel number, and waited. When the map loaded, my stomach dropped. According to the county, my land was now labeled Trent Ridge Estate, HOA. The boundaries had shifted. Not by much. Just enough. About 200 feet south. Just enough to make it look like the houses were built on a separate parcel. Just enough to make me look like I was wrong. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Then I looked up at the gate, at the man still standing there watching me, and I realized something. This wasn't a mistake. Mistakes don't come with security guards and freshly paved roads. Mistakes don't rename your land after your own family and then lock you out. This was deliberate. I started the engine and drove into town. The county recorder's office closed at 5, and it was already 4:30. I made it with 10 minutes to spare. The clerk was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. I handed her the parcel number and asked for all the recorded documents from the past 2 years. She typed, frowned, typed again. "That's a lot of pages," she said. "There was a subdivision approval, a survey, permits, HOA filing, liens. I need all of it." She looked at me over her glasses. "Are you the owner?" "Yes." She printed it.
63 pages. I paid the fee, took the stack, and sat down in the hallway under the fluorescent lights. I started with the survey. It was dated 14 months ago. The surveyor's name was someone I didn't recognize. The boundaries didn't match my deed, not even close. I cross-referenced the meets and bounds, the coordinates, and the landmarks. The old oak wasn't mentioned. Neither were the stone markers my father set. It was like someone had drawn a completely new map and pretended the old one never existed. But here's the thing. Surveys don't just happen. Someone orders them. Someone pays for them. Someone signs off. I flipped to the HOA filing. There it was. Articles of Incorporation for Trent Ridge Estate Homeowners Association, signed by the board president, a woman named Madeleine Priestly. I didn't know her. I'd never heard the name, but she'd signed documents claiming ownership of land that had my family's name on a deed 50 years old. I took a photo of every page. Then I walked back to my truck, sat in the parking lot, and opened the photos one by one. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. The permits had been issued without any notice to adjacent landowners. The environmental review had been waived. The subdivision approval had gone through in under 60 days, which almost never happens. And the survey, the one that moved my boundaries, had been filed by a company that didn't exist anymore. I looked up the business license. Revoked. Last year. For fraud. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. Someone had built 11 mansions on my land while I was gone. Someone had forged documents, bribed officials, or simply gambled that no one would notice. And someone had been so confident, so certain I wouldn't come back, that they'd named the whole development after me, like a trophy. I started the truck and drove back to the gate. The guard was gone. Shift change. Probably. I didn't go in. I just sat there, engine idling, looking at the lights in the windows of houses that shouldn't exist. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. Harris & Stone, attorneys at law. I need to speak with someone about a land dispute, I said. How soon can I come in? We have an opening Monday morning at 9. I'll take it. I hung up. Monday was 3 days away. 3 days to stay calm. 3 days to build a case. 3 days to make sure that when I walked back through that gate, it wouldn't be as a trespasser. It would be as the owner. Monday morning. I was the first person through the door at Harris & Stone. The receptionist offered coffee. I declined. A man in his 40s appeared 5 minutes later. Crisp white shirt, navy tie, handshake firm but not aggressive. David Stone, he said. Come on back. His office smelled like leather and old paper. Law books lined 2 walls. I sat across from him and slid the deed across the desk. He unfolded it, studied it for a long moment, then looked up. 1972. Clean title, as far as I know. And you're telling me someone built on this without your permission? 11 houses, while I was out of state. He leaned back, fingers steepled. How long were you gone? 13 months. My mother was sick. I had power of attorney, paid the property taxes online, and kept everything current. When I left, the land was empty. When I came back, it wasn't. Stone picked up a pen, started taking notes. Did you receive any notice, certified letters, court summons, anything? Nothing. And the county approved construction. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos, and slid it across. He scrolled through them slowly. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten when he reached the forged survey. This is bad, he said quietly. How bad? Bad enough that if what you're showing me is accurate, someone committed fraud, possibly multiple someones. He stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a blank legal pad. For the next 20 minutes, he asked questions. Who owned the land before my father, whether there were any easements or encumbrances, whether I'd ever granted permission for surveys or land use, whether anyone had approached me about selling. The answer to all of it was no. When he finished, he set the pen down and looked at me. I'm going to be straight with you. Mr. Trent, this is going to get expensive and it's going to take time. But if your deed is legitimate and that survey is forged, you have a case. A strong one. How strong?
Strong enough that they'll settle before trial if they have any sense. But first, we need to confirm what you've found. I want an independent surveyor out there this week. Someone with no connection to the county or this HOA. We'll also need to pull the full chain of title. Get the metadata on that digital survey file and verify the recordation dates. I nodded. What do I do in the meantime? Stay away from the property. Don't contact the HOA. Don't make threats. Let me handle the communication. If they know you're building a case, they'll start covering tracks. I thought about the guard at the gate. The woman's name is on the HOA documents. Madeleine Priestly. What if they already know? Stone smiled, thin and cold. Then they're going to make mistakes. People always do when they think they've gotten away with something. I left his office with a retainer agreement signed and a check written. $2,000 up front. Small price for what I was about to get back. Stone said he'd have the surveyor out by Wednesday. I spent the next 2 days digging. I pulled every public record I could find on Madeleine Priestly. Turned out she wasn't hard to track. Real estate developer, 38 years old. She'd built 3 other subdivisions in the county over the past decade, all high-end, all profitable. Her company was called Priestly Development Group, LLC, registered in Delaware. I found her LinkedIn. Polished headshot, expensive suit. Tagline that read, "Transforming communities through vision and leadership." I looked at her face for a long time. Sharp cheekbones, confident smile. The kind of person who walked into rooms and expected them to rearrange themselves around her. I wondered if she knew my name when she signed those documents, or if I was just a parcel number to her. Just empty land no one would miss. Wednesday afternoon. Stone called. "Surveyor finished. You were right. The boundaries on that field survey don't match the original deed or the physical landmarks. The old oak tree you mentioned, it's still there. Still on your property. And according to the new survey, every single one of those houses is on your land." I closed my eyes. So what's next? I'm drafting a cease and desist letter. It'll go out tomorrow via certified mail to the HOA board and every homeowner. We're demanding they stop all activity on the property and provide documentation proving legal ownership. If they can't, we move to file a lawsuit. How long before we hear back? Legally, they have 30 days. Realistically, I'd expect a call within 72 hours. He was wrong. It took 48. I was sitting in my motel room when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. I answered. "Mr. Trent?" A woman's voice. Smooth, controlled, with just a hint of steel underneath. "This is Madeleine Priestly. I think we need to talk." I didn't call her back. Not right away. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, phone in my hand, and stared at the number on the screen. Madeleine Priestly, the woman who'd signed her name to my land, the woman who thought a phone call could fix what she'd done. I could picture her now, sitting in some glass-walled office, confident that a conversation would smooth this over, that I'd be reasonable, that I'd take a settlement and disappear. She didn't know me, and she didn't know what I had. I called Stone instead. She reached out, I said. Madeleine Priestly. Left a voicemail asking to talk. There was a pause on the other end. Don't respond. Not yet. Let me handle it. If she's calling you directly. She's worried. That's good. It means the letter landed. What do you need from me? I need you to stay patient, and I need you to trust the process. We've got leverage now. Let's not waste it. I hung up and opened my laptop. If Priestly was worried. There was a reason, and I wanted to know what it was before anyone tried to spin a story. I started with the survey company listed on the forged documents, Valley Precision Land Surveys. The county business registry showed it had been active for 6 years before the license was revoked last March. Reason listed fraudulent documentation. I dug deeper, found the owner's name, Carl Brewster. I ran a search on him. No criminal record, no lawsuits, but his LinkedIn had gone dark 8 months ago. The last post was a generic quote about integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me. I kept digging, found a cached version of the company website from 2 years ago. Standard stuff. Services offered, testimonials, contact info, but there was a blog section, I clicked through. Most of it was generic. How to prepare for a property survey, understanding easements, that kind of thing. Then I found one titled Common Survey Errors and How to Avoid Them. It was dated 3 years back, and buried in the middle was a line that made me stop cold. Always verify landmark references against historical records. A survey is only as good as its source data. I sat back. Carl Brewster knew. He knew what made a survey legitimate, which meant when he put his name on a document that ignored every landmark on my father's deed. It wasn't incompetence. It was intentional. I needed to find him. A reverse phone lookup pulled an address in a town 30 miles south. Small place. The population maybe 5,000. I grabbed my keys. The house was a single-story ranch at the end of a cul-de-sac. The lawn needed mowing. The mailbox was crooked. I knocked. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when the neighbor's door opened, a woman in her 60s, watering a planter box on her porch. "You looking for Carl?" she called over. "Yes, ma'am. He's not there. Moved out 2 months ago. Didn't say where." I walked over. "Did he say why he was leaving?" She set the watering can down, wiped her hands on her jeans. "Didn't have to. The whole neighborhood knew. He lost his business. Some kind of scandal. I felt bad for him. Honestly. He was a nice guy. Quiet. Kept to himself. Did anyone come looking for him before he left?" She thought about it. "Once. A woman. Fancy car. She didn't stay long. Left an envelope in the mailbox. Do you remember what she looked like? Blonde. Wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy. Didn't smile much." I thanked her and walked back to my truck. Blonde. Fancy car. I pulled up Priestly's LinkedIn photo again. Blonde. I'd bet money on the car being fancy. 2. I called Stone from the road. I found the surveyor, or where he used to live. He's gone. But a neighbor said a woman matching Priestly's description visited him before he disappeared. Stone was quiet for a beat. "That's not proof." "Not yet, but it's a thread. What do we do with it?" "Let me make some calls. If Brewster's license was revoked for fraud, there will be a state investigation file. Those are public records. If Priestly's name shows up anywhere in that file, we've got a connection. And if it doesn't, then we keep pulling threads until something unravels." I drove back to the motel and opened the metadata file Stone had sent me earlier. The forged survey had been created as a PDF 14 months ago, but the software signature showed it wasn't made with professional surveying software. It was Adobe Illustrator, a graphic design program. I zoomed in on the file properties: creation date, modification date, author name. The author's field was blank, but the modification date was interesting. The file had been edited 3 times. The last edit was 2 days before it was submitted to the county. I cross-referenced that date with the business license timeline. Valley Precision Land Surveys had already been under investigation by then, which meant whoever created this file knew the company was compromised, knew it was about to lose its license, and used it anyway, because a defunct company can't defend itself, can't testify, can't contradict a story. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. This wasn't just fraud. It was premeditated, calculated. Someone had picked a surveyor on the edge of collapse, forged his work, and buried my land under 11 mansions before anyone could ask questions. And that someone had my family's name on a plaque at the front gate. My phone buzzed. Text from Stone. "State investigation file just came through. You're going to want to see this. Brewster stated before he lost his license. He claims someone offered him $50,000 to falsify a survey. He refused. 2 weeks later, someone used his company seal anyway." I texted back. "Does he know who offered?" 3 dots appeared. Then, he does. Guess who? Stone's office felt different the second time I walked in. Less like a consultation and more like a war room. He had documents spread across the conference table. 3 stacks, each labeled with a colored tab. Red for the forged survey, blue for the state investigation file, yellow for the HOA incorporation papers. He looked up when I entered. Carl Brewster named Madeleine Priestly in his statement to the state board. Said she approached him personally. Offered him $50,000 to adjust the boundaries on a survey for a property in the North County.
He turned her down, told her it was illegal and he wouldn't risk his license. I sat down across from him. So she did it herself. Looks that way. Brewster said 2 weeks after he refused. He got a call from the county asking why he'd submitted a survey he'd never actually done. By the time he figured out what had happened, the document was already recorded and construction permits were being issued. He tried to report it, but the state board moved slowly, opened an investigation, but by the time they revoked his license, the houses were already framed. Stone slid a folder across the table. Inside was a photocopy of Brewster's signed affidavit. I read it twice. His handwriting was shaky in places, like he'd been upset when he wrote it. At the bottom, he'd added a note. I never signed that survey. Someone stole my seal. I don't know how, but I know who benefits. I looked up. Can we use this? Absolutely. It's a sworn statement to a state regulatory agency. It's admissible, and it directly contradicts Priestly's position that everything was done legally. What's our next move? Stone pulled out a legal pad, already half filled with notes. We escalate. I'm filing a formal complaint with the county district attorney. Fraud, forgery, and theft of services. That's criminal, separately. I'm filing a civil suit, trespass, unjust enrichment, and quiet title action. We're asking the court to declare you the rightful owner and order the removal of all structures, or require the homeowners to pay fair market lease rates retroactively. I let that sink in. How much are we talking? I had an appraiser run the numbers. 15 acres in this area, zoned residential. The current market rate for land lease is about $10,000 per acre per year. You've got 11 houses on your land. They've been there 14 months. That's roughly $200,000 in back rent, conservatively. But if we argue they knew the land wasn't theirs, we can push for treble damages under state law. That triples it. I did the math in my head. $600,000, just for the time they'd already been there. And if they stay, then they pay going forward, or they move. Either way, you win. He paused. But here's the thing. Rowan, this is going to get ugly. Priestly's not going to roll over. She's got money. She's got lawyers, and she's got 11 families who thought they bought legitimate property. Some of them are going to be sympathetic. Some are going to be angry. And some are going to blame you. For what? Owning my own land? For disrupting their lives? Fair or not, that's how they'll see it. You need to be ready for that. I thought about the houses on the hill, the lights in the windows. The kids' bikes are on the porches. Then I thought about my father, standing on that same hill 50 years ago, planting an oak tree because he wanted to leave something behind. I'm ready. Stone made a call, put it on speaker. A woman answered. Keegan and Associates. This is David Stone. I need to speak with Richard Keegan. 1 moment. The hold music lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then a man's voice came on, rough and direct. Stone, what do you need? I've got a client with a land dispute. Forged survey. Illegal construction. The works. I need someone who can do a full forensic property analysis. Chain of title. Boundary verification. The whole package. How dirty is it? State investigation. Criminal referral. Probably ends up in front of a grand jury. There was a low whistle on the other end. Send me what you've got. I'll have someone out there by the end of the week. Stone hung up and looked at me. Richard Keegan is the best surveyor in the state. If there's a discrepancy, he'll find it. And when he testifies, judges listen. The next day, I met Keegan at the site. He was in his 60s, with white hair and weathered face, boots that had seen 1,000 muddy fields. He carried a tripod and a metal case that looked like it had survived a war. We walked the property line together. He stopped at the old oak tree, ran his hand over the bark, then checked his GPS unit. This is the landmark from the '72 deed. Yes. He nodded, pulled out a tape measure, and started walking. For 2 hours. He moved across the land, setting markers, checking elevations, and taking notes. I followed at a distance, watching him work. Finally, he came back to where I was standing. Your deed's accurate. Every landmark matches. The tree, the stone markers, even the old fence posts.
Whoever drew that other survey either didn't come out here at all, or didn't care. Can you prove it? He tapped the metal case. I've got coordinates accurate to within 2 centimeters. I've got photos, measurements, and soil samples. When I write my report, there won't be any question. How long? 3 days, maybe 4. I drove back into town and stopped at a Starbucks, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window with my laptop. I pulled up the county property records again, this time looking at sales data. Found the transactions for all 11 houses. They'd sold between 8 months and a year ago. Prices ranged from $600,000 to nearly $900,000. Total value over $8 million. I sat back. $8 million was built on land someone stole. The homeowners were victims too, in a way. They'd bought houses they thought were legitimate. But that didn't change the fact that those houses were on my land. And it didn't change what I was owed. My phone buzzed. Text from Stone. Priestly's attorney just called. She wants to meet, in person, tomorrow, you, me, her, and her lawyer. No recordings. Off the record. I stared at the message. She wanted to talk, which meant she knew she was in trouble. I texted back. Where? Her office. 10 a.m. I thought about it. Thought about walking into her territory. Sitting across from the woman who'd erased my family's legacy with a forged signature. Then I typed, I'll be there. Priestly Development Group occupied the top floor of a 3-story building on Main Street. Glass doors, marble lobby. A receptionist who smiled like she was paid to. She directed us to a conference room with a view of the courthouse. Intentional, I thought. A reminder of where this could end up. Madeleine Priestly was already seated when we walked in. Blonde hair pulled back tight, navy blazer, diamond earrings that caught the light. She stood, extended her hand to Stone first, then to me. Her grip was firm, controlled. Mr. Trent, thank you for coming. I didn't return the pleasantry, just sat down. Stone did the same. Her attorney was a man in his 50s, with silver hair and expensive suit. He introduced himself as Gerald Voss, partner at some firm in the state capital, the kind of lawyer you hire when you're serious about winning. Voss opened a leather portfolio. Let's be clear about why we're here. My client has received your cease and desist letter. She's reviewed the claims. And while she disputes the characterization of events, she's willing to discuss a resolution. Stone leaned back. What kind of resolution? A financial one. Ms. Priestly is prepared to offer Mr. Trent $250,000 for a retroactive easement and quitclaim deed. In exchange, Mr. Trent withdraws all legal claims and acknowledges the HOA's right to the current property boundaries. I looked at Priestly. She met my eyes, calm and steady, like this was just another negotiation, just another deal. Stone didn't blink. That's insulting. Voss smiled thinly. It's generous, considering the alternative is years of litigation and uncertain outcomes. The alternative, Stone said, is a criminal fraud investigation, a quiet title action that your client will lose, and a judgment for retroactive lease payments in the range of $600,000, minimum. Priestly's expression didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten around her pen. Mr. Stone, I think you're operating under some misconceptions. The survey we used was conducted by a licensed professional. The permits were issued by the county. Everything was done legally. Stone slid a folder across the table. Carl Brewster's affidavit, submitted to the state licensing board. He states, under oath, that you approached him to falsify a survey, that he refused, and that 2 weeks later, someone used his company seal without authorization. Priestly opened the folder, read for maybe 30 seconds, then closed it. Her face was a mask. Mr. Brewster was under investigation for multiple infractions. His credibility is questionable. The state board didn't think so. They revoked his license based on fraud. But the fraud wasn't his. It was committed against him. Someone stole his seal. Someone forged his signature. And according to his testimony, that someone works for you. Voss cut in. This is speculation. You have no direct evidence linking Ms. Priestly to any forgery. Stone pulled out another document. Metadata analysis of the survey file submitted to the county. It was created in Adobe Illustrator, not professional surveying software. It was edited 3 times, the last time being 2 days before submission, and the original creation date was 1 week after Brewster says he refused your client's offer. Voss glanced at Priestly. She didn't look at him, didn't look at anyone, just stared at the table. Stone kept going. We also have a witness who places a woman matching Ms. Priestly's description at Brewster's residence around the time the forged survey was created. We're currently seeking security footage from nearby businesses to confirm. The room was silent. Then Priestly spoke. Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. You think you know what happened? You don't. Then enlighten us, Stone said. She looked up. I bought that land in good faith. I paid for a survey. I filed the permits. I did everything by the book. If there was an error in the survey, it wasn't mine. Except you didn't buy the land, I said. It was the first time I'd spoken since sitting down. There's no record of sale, no transfer of title, no deed in your name. You just took it. Her eyes locked on mine. The land was abandoned, overgrown. No one had set foot on it in years. I checked. You checked wrong. Did I? She leaned forward. You were gone for over a year. Mr. Trent? No signs of life, no maintenance, no response to county notices. For all intents and purposes, you'd walked away. I was taking care of my dying mother. Something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not sympathy, just a brief crack in the facade. Then it was gone. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the fact that I invested $8 million into developing that land. I have 11 families living there, people who bought homes in good faith. You can't just take that away. It's not his land to take, Stone said. It's his land to begin with. Voss tried to steer things back. Gentlemen, my client is offering a settlement. $250,000 is more than fair for what amounts to a boundary dispute. It's not a boundary dispute, Stone said. It's theft, and Ms. Priestly knows it. Priestly stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Voss stood with her. We'll be in touch. They left. The door clicked shut behind them. Stone and I sat in silence for a moment. Then he started packing up his files. She's rattled. Didn't look rattled to me. She stood up first. Ended the meeting on her terms. That's what people do when they're losing control and need to take it back. He closed his briefcase. She's going to make a mistake. Probably soon. What kind of mistake? The kind that happens when someone gets desperate, when they've built their entire position on a lie and the truth starts catching up. He looked at me. Stay ready. When she moves, we need to be faster. I walked out of that building knowing one thing for certain. Madeleine Priestly wasn't going to settle. She was going to fight. And when people fight dirty, they leave tracks. The county courthouse smelled like floor polish and old wood. Stone and I arrived 15 minutes early for the preliminary hearing. The hallway was already crowded. I recognized some of the faces. Homeowners from Trent Ridge Estate. They stood in clusters, whispering, glancing at me like I was the villain in their story. A woman in her 30s held a toddler on her hip. A man in a suit checked his phone every few seconds, jaw tight. These were people who'd bought houses, who'd moved in, hung pictures, planted gardens. And now they were here because of me. Except it wasn't because of me. It was because someone sold them something that was never hers to sell. Stone touched my elbow. Ignore them. Focus on the facts. We walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, rows of benches, and a judge's bench at the front. The bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Martin Carver entered. Late 50s, gray hair, reading glasses perched on his nose. He sat, shuffled papers, and looked up. Case number 4729. Trent versus Priestly Development Group and Trent Ridge Estate Homeowners Association. Mr. Stone, you're representing the plaintiff. Stone stood. Yes, Your Honor. And Ms. Priestly is represented by Gerald Voss, rose from the defense table. Gerald Voss, Your Honor, on behalf of Priestly Development Group and the HOA. Judge Carver nodded. This is a preliminary hearing on Mr. Trent's motion for a temporary restraining order and quiet title action. Mr. Stone, You may proceed. Stone approached the bench, calm and methodical. He laid out the case in 5 minutes. The original deed from 1972. The boundaries are clearly defined by landmarks and coordinates. My absence is due to a family emergency. The forged survey that shifted the property line. The illegal construction. He submitted the deed. Keegan's forensic survey report. Brewster's affidavit. And the metadata analysis. Judge Carver took his time reviewing each document. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of paper. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Voss, your response... Voss stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, my client disputes the characterization of this survey as forged. Valley Precision Land Surveys was a licensed entity at the time the survey was conducted. The county approved the permits based on that survey. Ms. Priestly acted in good faith throughout this process. The plaintiff's claim rests on a 50-year-old deed that may not reflect current boundaries due to natural erosion, shifts in landmarks, or other factors. Stone didn't wait for the judge to respond. He stood again. Your Honor, may I address that? Go ahead. The defense is suggesting that landmarks move. They don't. The oak tree referenced in the original deed is still standing. It's still in the same location. Mr. Keegan's survey confirms it. The stone markers placed by Mr. Trent's father in 1972 are still visible. The coordinates haven't changed. What has changed is the survey submitted by the defendant, and we have evidence that the survey was fabricated. Voss cut back in. Evidence from a disgraced surveyor who lost his license for fraud. Carl Brewster has every reason to deflect blame onto my client. Stone pulled another document from his folder. Your Honor, this is an email recovered from the county's digital records. It was sent from an account registered to Priestly Development Group to the county planning office. The subject line reads, Updated Survey for Parcel APN 347-021. The attachment is the forged survey. The timestamp is 3 days after Valley Precision Land Surveys' license was revoked. My client is asking the court to believe she didn't know the company had lost its license, but her own email proves she submitted the document after the revocation. Judge Carver looked at Voss. Do you have a response to that? Voss hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Your Honor, my client was not personally aware of the license status. That was handled by administrative staff. Administrative staff who sent an email under her company's name, Stone said, using her business account, with her approval. Judge Carver held up a hand. I've heard enough for now. Ms. Priestly, please stand. Madeleine Priestly rose from her seat at the defense table. She looked composed, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Ms. Priestly, the judge said, did you personally review the survey before it was submitted to the county? I did, Your Honor. And did you verify that the surveying company was properly licensed? She paused. I relied on my team to handle those details. That's not what I asked. Her jaw tightened. No, Your Honor. I did not personally verify the license. Did you know that Carl Brewster claims you approached him to alter a survey and that he refused? Voss started to stand. Your Honor, that's... Sit down. Mr. Voss, I'm asking Ms. Priestly. She looked at the judge. I did approach Mr. Brewster. I asked him to conduct a survey. He quoted me a price I found unreasonable. I declined his services and hired another firm. Which firm? Silence. Stone stepped forward. Your Honor, there is no record of any other surveying firm being hired. The only survey on file is the one bearing Valley Precision's stolen seal. Judge Carver removed his glasses, set them on the bench. Ms. Priestly, I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you, or anyone acting on your behalf, create a fraudulent survey to obtain construction permits for land you did not own? Voss stood quickly. Your Honor, my client invokes her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The courtroom erupted. Whispers turned into voices. One of the homeowners shouted, What the hell does that mean? The bailiff called for order. Judge Carver banged his gavel twice. Quiet. The room settled. He looked at Voss. Your client is invoking the Fifth in a civil proceeding. Yes, Your Honor. That's her right, but you understand how that will be perceived. Voss said nothing. Judge Carver turned to Stone. Mr. Stone, based on the evidence presented, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. All construction, sales, and occupancy activities on the disputed property are hereby suspended pending a full title hearing. The property will be placed under a court-appointed neutral manager. Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the County District Attorney for criminal investigation into possible fraud and forgery. He banged the gavel. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full evidentiary hearing. The courtroom emptied slowly. Homeowners filed out, some angry, some crying. The woman with the toddler looked back at me, her face pale. I wanted to say something, to tell her I didn't want this, that I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's life, but I didn't, because the truth was, this wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what was right. Stone packed his briefcase. That went better than expected. She took the fifth, which means she knows she's guilty. And now so does everyone else. I looked toward the defense table. Priestly was still seated, staring at the wood grain. Voss leaned down, whispered something. She shook her head. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. We walked out into the hallway. A reporter from the local paper was waiting, mid-30s, notebook in hand. Mr. Trent, do you have a comment on today's ruling? I stopped, thought about all the things I could say. About my father, about the year I spent watching my mother die while someone stole the only thing he'd left me, about justice. Instead, I said, the truth speaks for itself. The reporter scribbled that down. What happens to the families living in those homes? I looked at Stone. He stepped in. That will be determined at the full hearing. But Mr. Trent has made it clear he's not interested in displacing anyone. He's interested in what's fair. The reporter turned back to me. And what's fair? I met her eyes. That people are held accountable for what they've done, and that my land stays mine. We left the courthouse. Outside. The sun was too bright. I squinted against it, felt the weight of the day settle into my bones. Stone clapped me on the shoulder. You did well in there. I didn't do anything. You did. You showed up. That's more than most people do. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. I opened it. You've made a powerful enemy. Be careful. I showed it to Stone. He frowned. Priestly, maybe. Or someone who works for her. Forward it to me. I'll pass it to the DA. Witness intimidation is a crime. I forwarded the message, then deleted it. Didn't need the reminder. I already knew what I was up against, and I wasn't backing down. 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing, the district attorney filed formal charges. 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of forgery, 1 count of filing false documents with a government agency. All felonies. Madeleine Priestly's face appeared on the evening news. The anchor used words like alleged and accused. But everyone knew. The damage was done. Her company's website went dark 2 days later. The phone number disconnected. By the end of the week, Priestly Development Group had quietly dissolved. But the criminal case moved forward. The DA assigned it to a prosecutor named Karen Mbai. She was in her 40s, sharp, with a reputation for not settling unless the defendant gave her something worth taking. I met her once, briefly, in the courthouse hallway. She shook my hand and said, "Thank you for not letting this go. People like her count on people like you giving up." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The plea deal came faster than I expected. Voss reached out to Stone in early December. Priestly would plead guilty to 1 count of fraud and 1 count of forgery. In exchange, the state would drop the false filing charge. Sentencing recommendation 18 months suspended. 500 hours of community service. $50,000 in fines. And a 10-year ban from serving on any HOA board or holding any position in property development within the state. She'd also be required to cooperate fully in the civil case. Stone called me with the news. It's a good deal. She avoids jail time, but she's done. Professionally, legally, she's finished. And the homeowners, that's what we deal with next. The full civil hearing is scheduled for January 15th. Judge Carver will make a final ruling on ownership and what happens to the houses. What do you think he'll do? Stone was quiet for a moment. Legally, you own the land. That's not in question anymore. The question is a remedy. He could order the houses removed,
but that's extreme. More likely, he'll order the homeowners to pay you lease fees or negotiate a buyout. The hearing lasted 2 days. The courtroom was packed. All 11 homeowners showed up. Some brought lawyers. Some just brought anger. Judge Carver started by laying out the facts. The deed was legitimate. The survey was forged. The construction was done without the landowner's knowledge or consent. Therefore, the structures were built unlawfully on Mr. Trent's property. One of the homeowners, a man in his 50s, stood up. "Your Honor, I have 3 kids. We bought that house in good faith. We didn't know it was built on stolen land. You can't punish us for something we didn't do." Judge Carver looked at him with something close to sympathy. "Mr. Dennison, I understand your position, and you're right. You are a victim here. But so is Mr. Trent. The question before this court is how to balance those interests." He turned to Stone. "Mr. Stone, what is your client seeking?" Stone stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Trent is seeking a declaratory judgment confirming his ownership. He is also seeking retroactive lease payments from the date construction began, calculated at the fair market rate. However, he is willing to negotiate long-term lease agreements with any homeowner who wishes to remain on the property." Judge Carver raised an eyebrow. "He's not seeking removal of the structures?" "No, Your Honor. Mr. Trent recognizes that the homeowners are victims of Ms. Priestly's fraud. He has no interest in displacing families. He simply wants to be compensated fairly for the use of his land." There was a murmur through the courtroom. Dennison sat down, looking stunned. Judge Carver made some notes, then looked up. "Very well. Here is my ruling. Title to the property known as Trent Ridge Estate, comprising 15 acres as described in the deed recorded in 1972, is hereby confirmed in the name of Rowan Trent. All structures currently on said property are deemed to be encroachments. However, given the equitable considerations and Mr. Trent's willingness to negotiate, I am ordering the following. Each homeowner shall have the option to enter into a 99-year ground lease with Mr. Trent at a rate to be determined by an independent appraiser. Alternatively, homeowners may choose to relocate their structures within 6 months, with costs to be recovered through civil action against Madeleine Priestly and Priestly Development Group. Additionally, the homeowners association known as Trent Ridge Estate HOA is hereby dissolved. All common assets shall be liquidated, and proceeds shall be paid to Mr. Trent as partial compensation for retroactive land use." He paused. "As for retroactive lease payments, I am awarding Mr. Trent the sum of $240,000, representing fair market lease value for 14 months of unauthorized use. This amount shall be paid jointly and severally by the homeowners, with right of contribution from Ms. Priestly." The gavel came down. It was over. The homeowners filed out slowly. Some looked relieved, others looked defeated. Dennison approached me in the hallway. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets. Finally, "Thank you for not kicking us out." "It's not about kicking anyone out," I said. "It's about what's fair." He nodded. "I know a few of the others are going to want to talk to you about the leases. We just need time to figure out the finances. Take the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." He shook my hand and walked away. Stone came up beside me. "That was decent of you. It was the right thing. Not everyone would see it that way. You could have pushed for removal, made them pay to move their houses, squeezed every dollar out of this. And then what I'd have 11 empty foundations and a reputation as the guy who destroyed families. No thanks." Stone smiled. "You're a better man than most." Rowan. 2 weeks later, I met with 8 of the 11 homeowners. We signed lease agreements. 99 years at $8,000 per acre per year, adjusted for inflation every decade. It was fair, maybe even generous. The other 3 homeowners chose to sue Priestly independently. I wished them luck. The $240,000 judgment came through in March. Priestly's assets had been seized by the court. Her downtown condo, her car, her investment accounts. It wasn't enough to cover the full amount, but it was something. The rest would come from the homeowners over time. I didn't push. The county issued a formal apology. The planning director resigned.
New protocols were put in place requiring secondary verification of all surveys before permits could be issued. It wouldn't undo what happened, but maybe it would stop it from happening to someone else. In April, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. It was from Madeleine Priestly. Short, 3 sentences. I convinced myself it was abandoned, that no one cared. I was wrong. I read it twice, then folded it and put it in a drawer. It wasn't an apology, but it was an admission, and that was enough. 6 months after the final ruling, I stood on the hill and watched the sun come up. The air smelled like cut grass and morning dew. Somewhere behind me, a sprinkler system clicked on. One of the homeowners keeping up their lawn. The old oak tree was still there, still standing where my father had planted it 53 years ago. I ran my hand over the bark, felt the rough texture under my palm. Someone had carved initials into it once. Not mine, not my father's, just some kid. Probably. Years ago. I didn't mind. The tree wasn't just ours anymore. It belonged to everyone who lived here now. I'd spent the past few months working with a property management company. They handled the leases, collected the rent, dealt with maintenance issues. I didn't want to be a landlord, didn't want to knock on doors and argue about late payments. I just wanted the land to be what it was always supposed to be, a place people could build a life. The old wooden house my father built still stood at the center of the property. I'd had it restored, new roof, new windows, fresh paint. But I kept the bones the same. The porch where he used to sit in the evenings, the kitchen where my mother made coffee every morning, the bedroom where I grew up. It wasn't a museum, it was just home. I'd moved back in 2 months ago. Some of the neighbors had welcomed me, brought over casseroles and handshakes. Others kept their distance. I understood. I was a reminder of something uncomfortable, a disruption they hadn't asked for. But slowly, things settled. Dennison invited me to a barbecue in July. I went, ate a burger, drank a beer, talked about nothing important. His kids ran through the yard with a dog. One of them asked if I was the man who owned everything. Dennison laughed, embarrassed, but I just shook my head. I own the land, I said. You own the home. There's a difference. The kid thought about that, then ran off. Dennison looked at me. You could have made this a lot harder. What would that have accomplished? He didn't have an answer. Neither did I. In August, I planted a new tree, a young oak, sapling really, right next to the old one. I didn't have a ceremony, didn't invite anyone, just dug the hole, set the roots, and packed the soil down. It felt right. One tree for what was, one for what could be. Stone called that afternoon. You see the news? What news? Priestly's been disbarred from holding any business license in 3 surrounding states. The fraud conviction triggered reciprocal enforcement. She's done. Completely. I didn't feel victorious. Just tired. Good. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. About how none of this brought my father back. Or my mother. It didn't undo the year I lost. It just made sure no one could do it again. Stone was quiet. Then, that's not nothing, Rowan. I know. September brought cooler air. I started getting inquiries from other people, folks who'd had run-ins with HOAs, who'd been fined or bullied or pushed off land they thought they owned. Stone forwarded me a few, asked if I'd be willing to consult, to share what I'd learned. I thought about it, about whether I wanted to spend the rest of my life fighting other people's battles. In the end, I agreed to help one case, just one. A veteran in the next county whose HOA was trying to foreclose over unpaid dues he didn't actually owe. It took 3 meetings and a stack of documents, but we got it sorted. He called me a hero. I told him I was just someone who knew how to read a deed. The county invited me to join an advisory board, something about land use reform and preventing fraud. I accepted, not because I wanted recognition, but maybe I could make the system a little bit harder to cheat. By October, the property felt less like a battleground and more like a neighborhood. Someone hung Christmas lights early. Someone else started a book club. I got invited. Didn't go. But I appreciated the thought. I spent most evenings on the porch, watching the lights come on in the houses around me. 11 families, 11 lives. They weren't trespassers anymore. They were tenants, neighbors, people who belonged here as much as I did. One night, a couple walking their dog stopped at the fence. The woman waved. I waved back. "Beautiful evening," she called. "It is," I said. They kept walking. It was a small thing, but it felt like progress. I pulled out the letter Priestly had sent me, read it one more time. Then I folded it, walked inside, and put it in the fireplace, struck a match, watched it burn. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about letting go. The land was mine again, not because a judge said so, not because I had the paperwork, but because I'd fought for it, because I'd stood up when it would have been easier to walk away. My father had bought this land because he wanted to leave something behind, something that mattered. I'd almost lost it, but I didn't. And now, standing under the old oak tree with the sun setting behind the hills, I realized something. He hadn't just left me land. He'd left me a choice, to fight or to fold, to stand or to surrender. I chose to stand, and I'd do it again. Sometimes the system feels rigged. Sometimes it feels like the powerful always win. But stories like Rowan's remind us that truth, documentation, and persistence still matter. If you've ever felt pushed around by an HOA, a landlord, or anyone abusing authority, you're not alone. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more real accounts of people standing up and winning against the odds, follow the HOA stories, because every victory starts with someone who refused to back down.